Wellness and Blessings family. This is Tisha Hillman, and you are tuned in to Sis We Need to Talk, which is a weekly show where we talk to women, in particular, Black women specifically, about the issues that we deal with as Black women, as a community, as a family, and we work to have constructive conversations about how to resolve some of the issues that we have. Um, I have a very, very packed show today, so I want to go ahead and get started. But the title of our show today is Students versus Masters. And what does it mean to be a student? And what does it mean to be a master? Um, but before we jump into that topic, I want to talk to you guys about the three T's, or Tisha's trending topics. Today, we actually have more than three. We have five, because every week I tell you there's so much going on. And I can fill the show with trending topics. But if you guys have been paying attention to what's happening on the political scope, there are many, many people throwing their hats into the race for the 2020 presidential election, including California Senator Kamala Harris, Cory Booker out of New Jersey, and most recently, Marianne Williamson, who is actually an author. Now, the interesting thing, and I do want to talk about Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, but the interesting thing about Marianne Williamson is her proposition that Black people need to be paid reparations for the U.S.'s contributions to slavery. Now, I find that to be a very interesting proposition. One that I am all for. Is it going to happen? I don't know. But I do think it's an interesting proposition. And the reason being is something that I've mentioned on this show many, many times. It's the understanding that money equals currency. Currency is energy. Energy is what fuels something. And so when you take all of the resources from someone financially, you beat down their spirit, all of these things collectively, it leaves people without the will or the wheel, right? So it stops the wheels of progress from spinning. And that's because the people have been so stripped of their will and the wheel, it stops things. And so I honestly believe that if there was an infusion of energy into our communities, that it would help to get things moving, whether that be from starting Black businesses, which I think is one of the major things that needs to happen. But just on a personal level, I think that if people were not in as much debt, right, owing another entity or another system, right, you wouldn't have to pull energy from another source, because obviously if you're in debt, then you don't have, it's lacking on one side but being made up on the other. So it's always that saying that we say, robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's exactly what debt is. It's transferring issues from one place to another. And so if we had a system in which we can actually generate income, and generate wealth, more so than income, generate wealth and generational wealth, I think it would get the ball rolling on a lot of things. So Marianne Williamson, we'll keep an eye out for her and see what she's really talking about. There's talks of Elizabeth Warren running, Joe Biden running, and possibly Bernie Sanders. Now, I haven't quite decided where my loyalties lie with any of these particular candidates. And the reason being is it's understanding what is the objective. Because right now, as we all know, many of us, we have a president who is, for all intents and purposes, a white supremacist. and I don't say that in jest. I say that as evidenced by the things that he said and the things that he has done. Those are the things that would lead me to believe that if you are saying these things and you are acting in concert with what it is that you're saying, that this is your intention. And so if the objective in the 2020 race for Democrats is to put someone into office that actually has the ability to oust Donald Trump and to get the ball moving again in terms of not having a Congress that is at a standstill, then we need to really look at who can actually do that. And so a lot of times what we do as people, because black folks were really emotional. And I don't mean that necessarily in a bad way, because emotions are necessary. But to allow ourselves to be controlled by emotion, that's where the problem lies. And what I mean when I say that is sometimes we get caught up in wanting to be right, um, so much so that we do it at the cost of winning. And if the objective is simply to be right, then have at it. But if the objective is actually to win, then we really need to think about things strategically. And I've said that on the show, and I will continue to say that because that is absolutely my conviction. It's what I believe. So, with that being said, I look at the policies that these people have put forth and the things that they've supported. And one of the things with Kamala Harris that's come up a lot is her position when she was a prosecutor. And being the head prosecutor, obviously, if you guys aren't familiar with the process, the state's attorney, or whatever they call them in that particular jurisdiction, but basically the head prosecutor, they have the distinct role of deciding what cases get prosecuted and which cases do not. So basically, they get to decide what justice actually looks like in that particular jurisdiction. So one of the things that has really come out with Kamala Harris is her prosecuting people who weren't necessarily needing to be prosecuted. Things that probably could have been dismissed. Not asking for lesser penalties when she could have, and those are the things that are coming up because obviously the large segment of the Democratic Party is black folks and brown folks, but these are also the same people that are trapped in the criminal justice system largely because of a lack of prosecutorial discretion, because that's what a prosecutor has, the chief prosecutor. Now, the people under her, they have to do what it is that she says because she's the chief prosecutor. So what I'm saying is, if you get to set the agenda and your agenda looks like incarcerating people that look like you, but then saying that you're for criminal justice reform, I can understand why that rubs some people the wrong way. And it's something that she's going to have to contend with. But because we are at this place in society where we just want to see a black woman in office, my fear is that we will continue to get the same outcomes because we're looking at the face, we're looking at the symbol and the representation rather than the facts. We don't like facts. We don't like truth. I mean, I don't support many things that the conservative agenda promotes. But I can say one thing is that facts matter on all sides. Facts matter because without the facts, what are we talking about? What are we dealing in? And so Kamala Harris, I don't know. I haven't made up my mind, but that is to say that I fully understand that whatever, or I should say whoever the Democratic nominee is, I'm going to get behind them, lock, stock, and barrel, because I understand that my objective, and I hope our objective, is to actually win. And if that's the case and she is the nominee, then she will get my vote. But when it comes to the early voting and choosing the nominee, I don't know. I gotta look at that a little bit further. But I say all of that to say, and to start this conversation by saying in every decision that we make, we gotta figure out what is the objective. Because if we don't know the objective, how can we make decisions? How can we decide anything if we don't know what the goal is? And so that brings me to the topic of Jussie Smollett. So if you guys have heard, first of all, Jussie Smollett, if you're not familiar, is the actor that plays Jamal on the show Empire. And Jussie Smollett is openly gay. And last week he was attacked in Chicago. And there were photographs of him in the hospital with a black eye and, scratches and things like that. Um, and almost immediately, people were coming out and saying, well, we don't know if he was attacked, and, there's some issues regarding that. He wouldn't release his cell phone for authorities to see. So it sparked all kinds of debate. I don't have an opinion about this either way. I just want to have the conversation because it's something that we're talking about as a community. And because of that, I think it's important for us to have this conversation. And what I mean when I say that is, what are we doing? Now, when I say what we're doing, here's what I mean. The singer Erykah Badu, I think it was on Instagram, or I think it was Instagram. But, she said something to the effect of looking at the facts before reaching a conclusion. And she was completely lambasted. And you know how we do. So people are saying, oh, she needs to be canceled. She's toxic. She's this. She's a pick me. That's the thing when black women, agree with black men. I'm sorry, agree with straight black men, we get labeled as pick me's, or meaning, pick me, I really want a man. Another issue. But so she got lambasted for saying, hold on, folks, something about this doesn't really make a lot of sense. We should really look at this before reaching a conclusion. And I want to talk about that for a second, because that's something that the right wing has said quite often, and they say it when there are police shootings. Now, here's the thing about that. This is where I draw the difference, and I believe that it's a different thing, but yet it has some similarities. Based on history and the behavior of people on the right, a lot of people on the right, not everybody, but a lot of people on the right, they're not saying wait for all the facts because they actually care about the facts. Because we've seen repeatedly that even when the facts come out, there's another justification for why this black man should have been shot, right? So I'm not saying wait for all the facts in that respect. But what I am saying is that if we are really at a place in society where we don't think facts matter, and we are saying that whatever it appears to be is what it is, then that is the problem that I have. Because not everything is what it seems. Because most things, if not all things, are based on the eyes that are viewing the situation. It's based on perspective. And so if we are saying, let's not wait for all the facts, that looks like the Me Too movement. And here's what I mean when I say that. I know a lot of people are going to be pissed off with me. That's not my concern. What I'm saying is what I've said on the show repeatedly, and I stand by what I say. In the Me Too movement, we are saying believe all women regardless of what it looks like, regardless of the facts, regardless of whatever, we're going to believe all women. What that means is if a black man is accused, or a man in general is accused of any crime against a woman, he is automatically guilty. So here's the problem with that, though. If we are supporting a candidate, and most of us are as black people, specifically black women, we are supporting a candidate like Kamala Harris. So you understand now why black men are looking at this like, wait, are we saying that Black Lives Matter, or are we saying that they only matter in this particular situation? Because if that's what we're saying, then I don't know what the objective is. It's a little confusing about what the objective actually is. Because if on one hand you're saying, well, if a woman accuses you, or if a gay person accuses you of something, you are automatically guilty. You should be canceled. That's our culture now, to cancel people. That means that you should not have the ability to work. You should not have the ability to earn income. And you should never be able to speak publicly ever again. Is that what we're saying? I'm just asking the question. Is that what we're saying? Because that's really what it looks like. These are the outcomes that you get from these knee-jerk reactions. And so this is why I don't think Erykah Badu was wrong in saying, wait, we have to look at the facts of things before we jump to a judgment call. Before we judge something, we have to look at both sides through a lens that is not tainted, but really looking objectively at both sides before we reach a conclusion and call a thing, because it may only be a thing from our perspective. Understand what I'm saying? I'm not saying that Jussie Smollett was not attacked. I'm not saying that even if he was attacked that it was right, because obviously that's absolutely terrible. That should not be. All I'm saying is we got to slow down, and we really got to examine things for what they are, because we get absurd outcomes when we don't. We get outcomes that we did not intend based on what we're saying our intention is. So that brings me to D.L. Hughley. Now, after Jussie Smollett was attacked, D.L. Hughley, the comedian, he offered his support, and he was lambasted. And I find that very interesting, because the reason he was lambasted is because I guess in one of his comedy routines a while ago, he made a remark that was perceived to be homophobic. And so now people are saying, basically, shut up, because you have no right to say anything because you once made a homophobic comment. It always boils down for me to folks, and what do we want from people? What are we asking of our people? Are we asking our people to support us? Or are we saying that we only want perfect allies? Because I will say this until I am blue in the face, if that's even possible. We're going to continue to get absurd outcomes. And we're going to continue to get results that we don't want if we are looking for perfect allies. Because understand this, folks. Black people, we have no permanent allies. We only have permanent interests. So what I'm saying is, look at the history of things before we make decisions about stuff. Look at the history, because that will tell you a lot. That will tell you everything you need to know if you look at the history when you're observing things from the current perspective. And so what I'm saying is, are we saying to people, if you have ever done anything wrong in your life, you deserve to have your money taken away from you, to have whatever titles, whatever you have, whatever you value. If you've been imperfect, you should have that all stripped from you. Based on where we are, I would say that that's exactly what we're saying, right? Because we're saying that with the Me Too movement. Even if it's, remember folks, this is even regardless of facts. So we're saying that in all respects. But then on the other hand, we're saying we're out marching and rallying when black men are shot by the police. So I'm a little confused sometimes about what it is that we're trying to do. Are we trying to progress as people, or are we trying to be right? Are we seeking retribution for perceived things that have been done to us? I mean, real or otherwise, right? Real or perceived things that we believe that have been done. Are we seeking retribution, or are we seeking progress? Because I tell you this, D.L. Hughley is not a perfect person. You are not a perfect person. I am not a perfect person, right? And I've talked about this on the show before. The kid, Triple X, I can never say that kid's name. Triple X Tentacion or whatever, the rapper that was killed last year. Young kid, and when he was killed, people were practically celebrating, saying that he got what he deserved, basically, because a woman once accused him of domestic violence. I don't know that. I mean, I literally don't know. And I don't know if any of us know either. But we make these snap judgments based on things that we read, and we don't even know what the hell is going on. We make these judgments and we cancel people. And then we wonder why our allyship is fading. And I keep saying this over and over. We got the results that we got in 2020 because we did not learn from the history. And I mean, I'm sorry, in 2018, or what year is this? Yeah, in the last election, I think 2018. No, 2016. I'm sorry. Time is just, Lord have mercy. But I'm saying that when we come to the 2020 election, if we don't learn from the things that we did before, we're going to get the same outcomes. Because if we're going to keep isolating all of our allies because they're imperfect, folks, please prepare for another 2 years of this current administration. That's all I'm saying. Because we can't tell people if you've ever done anything wrong, you deserve to be canceled and think that that's not going to have an impact. That's all I'm saying. And that brings me to Governor Ralph Northam out of Virginia. So you guys probably realize at this point that that's been all over the news. There was a photograph of him that surfaced in blackface. People are up in arms. You know, yes, blackface is absolutely terrible. People should not do it. But here's the thing that I think we got to look at. If you have a president that is an open white supremacist saying, "Oh my God, this is absolutely terrible. He needs to quit. He needs to resign. This is terrible." Why would he do that? Why would someone who clearly is a white supremacist say that the behavior of this other person is absolutely egregious and he needs to be removed from office? Why would he do that? Because he understands how this all works. Because if Ralph Northam, who's a Democrat, if he resigns, obviously he does have a lieutenant governor who's a black man. He does have a lieutenant governor. But this is what we do, though, as Democrats, because sometimes, actually most of the time, we're driven by emotion and we're not thinking logically and we're not strategizing. So what I'm saying is, I believe that Ralph Northam needs to resign, but not for the reasons that a lot of people do. I think he needs to resign because we're at a place in our society where it's going to now make it impossible for him to govern. Because if most of the base looks like you and I, it's going to make it very difficult for him to govern knowing that that information is out there. So I think he needs to resign for that reason. But what I'm saying is, why can't we get something out of the deal? Why can't we? It's Black History Month. You know, how is he going to preside or officiate over any Black History Month celebrations knowing that that's going to be juxtaposed to this photograph of him in blackface, right? So what I'm saying is, we got to face the reality that all of our allies, many of them, are not perfect. And so if we put the energy that we're putting into having him resign to getting something out of the deal if he resigns, right? Getting something out of the deal prior to that, that helps us. But instead we call for blood, right? We do that and we don't even think, okay, well, yes, this is something negative. How can we transmute it into something positive? Well, we transmute it into something positive by not making knee-jerk reactions and just calling for blood and not thinking, okay, what can I get out of this? What can we use him for while he's in this position? Because he's in the position. So can we use that for something while he's in the position and then ask him to resign? Or are we simply going to say, no, resign? Because remember, this is the same type of thing that happened with Al Franken. Photograph came out, woman said he did something, and we lost, someone that was in Congress. We lost a Democratic senator. We lost a Democratic senator. A Senate seat was left open because we said, I don't want to win. I want to be right. I want retribution right now. Folks, I think some of our issues can be tabled. Because understand this, when you are thinking about making power moves, you think about the long range goal. And so you understand that sometimes you got to let people play their position in order to get an advantage. And I'm not really sure why we don't get that sometimes. We would rather have our player completely off the board. Now we've lost the player in the game because we don't even understand the game that's being played. And here's the thing. All of this stuff is but a game. And we'll talk about that on the flip side. But I really hope that, we're sparking this conversation to be able to really have logical conversation about ways to actually move the needle. Because I would venture to say that the reason we're so stagnated is because we have so many different um, groups that we're trying to cater to. And I'm not saying that the needs of these groups don't matter. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is, can we unify on a central objective? Because this is how other people continue to win, divide and conquer. As long as you got people over here fighting, LGBT rights, and black women over here talking about screw black men, and you got folks over here talking about, well, let's cape for the immigrants, and then you got people over here talking. I mean, it's there's so many different agendas that it seems like we don't really have a central agenda, and that's how we lost in 2016, because we didn't have a central focus. And then once we did, we isolated our allies because they were imperfect. All I'm saying, folks, is I want to win. I want to win. And if we're going to win, we have to be unified in our purpose and unified in our thoughts. And that also means being unified in our actions. But I want to talk about a couple of other people very quickly. 21 Savage. What say you? Y'all probably heard 21 Savage. Come to find out, he lied about his bona fides. He's actually British. I wouldn't have known. But then again, I wouldn't know him if I saw him walking down the street. But anyway, come to find out, he's British. He's being detained by ICE because he overstayed his visa. He's probably going to be deported because we are in Trump's America. So he's probably going to be deported. But I want to know what say my community about this. What levels of deception are we okay with? I don't know. But I want to have the conversation because I'm trying to understand what our motivations are. I don't have an opinion about it. I just want to know your thoughts. And Tekashi 6ix9ine, he's facing 47 years in prison. And here's where I'm not a street, I've never been like a street chick, whatever. But I understand that there's a code to the streets. And I understand that part of that code is no snitching. So people have said that, he snitched in order to reduce his time. But I do wonder sometimes, though, is if it were you and your family was being threatened, you're in prison, so you can't do anything to protect them necessarily. What would you do? Would you snitch? I don't know. And do we need to re-examine some of these codes of the street? Are they simply other ways to keep us locked in a system when we're trying to be free? And do we actually want freedom, and what does that look like? So we'll talk about that on the flip side as we talk about students versus masters. So come forward with me in just a few minutes, and we'll talk about students versus masters. Thanks.
It's the new, all-natural, family-friendly pharmacy, Family Choice Pharmacy, located at 8313 Annapolis Road, New Carrollton, Maryland. Family Choice offers alternative medicines as well as discount programs you can easily enjoy. Come be a part of our family at Family Choice Pharmacy, as every family should know their pharmacist. If you're looking to join the family today, you can reach us at 301-577-1212 at Family Choice Pharmacy.
If you like to roller skate, you will love Lanham Skate Center. We offer all kinds of specials, birthday parties, skate classes, and more. You can even reserve the rink for a special event. Skate rentals only $3, so roll on over to Lanham Skate Center today. Located at 9901 Lanham Severn Road in Lanham, Maryland. For more information about our weekly schedule, visit us on the web at lanhamskatecenter.com or call for more information at 301-577-1733. That's 301-577-1733.
So, welcome forward, folks. You are tuned in to Sis We Need to Talk, and this segment is brought to you by the Law Office of Tisha S. Hillman. For any of your legal needs with respect to personal injury, family law, or criminal law, please be sure to call the Law Office of Tisha S. Hillman at 301-744-7996. You can also visit the Instagram page at TS Hillman Law and also on Facebook at TS Hillman Law. So before we went to break, we were talking about the trending topics, and we left off on Tekashi 6ix9ine. We were talking about the no snitching policy, and as it pertains to the code of the streets. And is that really a good code? Is that where we are, and is that where we want to remain? Does that make sense? Because the question that I posed was, if you were in that situation, facing basically spending the rest of your life in prison, and your family being threatened and not being able to protect your family, what would you do? I don't know. I've never been in that predicament, but I can't imagine that that's a very easy predicament to be in. And so it leads me to ask, what is it that we want? What is our objective? And is it such a violation for someone to want to protect their family? I don't know. But I do think that it's something that we need to suss out as a community, because we got to figure out who we are going to be in this game. Because understand this, folks. Oh, it is a game. And whether you want to be in it or not, guess what? You're here. We're all here, right? We're students of this game. We're people that are in a game that's being played, and we don't even know. Many of us don't even know that we're in this game. And so here's what I want to talk about, though. I want to read this quote by Marcus Garvey, and it'll be on the screen in just a minute. But Marcus Garvey once said, we are going to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery whilst others might free the body. None but ourselves can free the mind. The man who is not able to develop and use his mind is bound to be a slave of the other man who uses his mind. And this is why I always go back to thinking and thinking strategically. So you see the quote on the screen here. Because there are other people that will use their mind, and you will be enslaved to whatever it is that they want you to be enslaved to, because they're thinking and they're acting in response to what it is that they're thinking, and they're doing it with the intent of making sure that you remain mentally enslaved. That's the game. So when we're talking about slavery, right, we know that, funny enough, 400 years ago, this year in 1619, is when slaves were initially brought from the continent to the United States. 400 years ago. And so if you could understand our history, that, first of all, our history did not begin with slavery. Let me just say that. Because Black people have been on this planet since its inception, right? I don't know when the planet's inception was, but since forever, right? History shows it, DNA shows it. We were the first people here. So that is to say that our history did not begin with slavery. But I don't know if many of us actually know that. And so when I talk about the ability of someone to control your physical freedom, your body, that is not the same thing as someone being able to control your mind. Because as we know, slavery was abolished in 1865, right? And so after slavery was abolished, we all know there were Jim Crow laws. There's sundown towns. There's lynchings and hangings, and now we have mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex and the school to prison pipeline. And there's been a lot of effort to ensure that we lack the will to overcome. Why would anybody do that? And this is what I always try to get to in the show, is to take us back to the fundamentals. The fundamentals, right? Take us back to the beginning. Why were these things done? All of these things were done because we are in a game, folks. There are students, there are masters, and there are all other people in between. And if you think about it like a chess game, a lot of times we think about life as a game of chess. That's because there are many players on a chessboard. And it depends on your position, right? So let's just start with the pawns. And I'm not going to go into the whole like chess game, but I do want to talk about pawns because it's something that we talk about a lot. And so for me, I think it's important to always go back to the etymology of words and how words got their origin, because that matters. What was the original intention when this word was created? Because remember, before we had the written word, we had hieroglyphs. And so before we had the spoken word, we had pictographs and hieroglyphs. So we had symbols prior to having an oral recitation of what that picture, right, or that symbol represented. And so if you can look at a picture or a symbol and tell someone that it means this, and you continue to enunciate that and to say that over and over and over, and you get people to believe that symbol means one thing, but it actually means another, you've changed the meaning of the symbol now, haven't you? A symbol is just a symbol until you assign it meaning, right? And so this is why I always say what you call something matters. So the Latin word pawn, the word pawn, P-A-W-N, comes from the Latin word pes, ped, P-E-D, and the medieval Latin words pedo, P-E-D-O, and pedon, P-E-D-O-N, meaning foot soldier. The one who carries out the mission, the foot soldier, right? Those are the pawns in the game, those who are carrying out the mission. Think of the word pedestrian, right? Pedestrians, people who walk across the street, whatever, but pedestrian, or people who walk, right? But pedestrian could also mean commonplace. It's so common that it's become pedestrian, right? And so I say that to say that many people that we encounter are simply foot soldiers, and they don't even know it. Many, not all of them, but many don't even know that they're foot soldiers carrying out a mission that they may have not willingly signed up for. But this is what I mean when I say when we give our power to other people and we allow people to assign value and assign words to the symbol, then we allow them to have the power over the thing. Because the symbol is just a symbol until you give it meaning. And so a foot soldier can be for one mission or another, right? It just is. And it's so commonplace that they can be used for anything because there are pawns. Because a pawn can also mean to give something as security in exchange for, right? Like a pawn shop. You're giving something as security in exchange for something else. You're pledging it, right? So my thing is this. If we are pawns in this thing, that means that we're being used and being given up in exchange for something. What is that something that we are being exchanged for? And so I hope we can really have this conversation and really think about these things because they mean something. The way that you describe something means something. And so if you're going to play any role, be sure it's a role that you intentionally chose, that you set out and you said, this is the role that I'm going to play. And if that's a pawn, then play your position. If that's a master, then play your position. But we got to play these roles intentionally because even if we don't, we're going to be used in exchange for something else. Because either you're going to play the game your way or you're going to play it somebody else's way, but you're going to play the game. So in order to do this, though, you got to be aware of the games that you're playing. And you do this by understanding history. How was this thing, how did it start, right? How was it built? Who built it? How did they build it? What did they do? This is why I always talk about talking to our ancestors, talking to our grandparents, talking to our elders. This is why, as Black folks, it was so ingrained in us to respect our elders because we understood there was wisdom because they built it. They built it. So when we say we are not our ancestors, you damn right we're not our ancestors because they built it and they understood where they came from. They understood what it took to build this thing, right? And so if we're going to actually stand on the shoulders of these giants, we got to know what these giants have seen. And so I would implore you folks, don't be pawns in this game, but if you are, do so knowing that you're a pawn. Because here's the thing about a pawn. A pawn can move across the board diagonally, right? And so a pawn can play different positions because they're being used. And so what I'm saying is it depends on the objective. If your objective is to get to the other side of the board, then you got to move strategically. If that's your objective, right? And so if it's not your objective, then like I said before, it's someone's objective is being played out, but it depends on whose it is. And so when you think even about being a student, going to school, right? Most of us spent 12 years going to, I guess it's called primary school, I don't know, but 12 years going through school to reach a place where we've been, I'm sorry, I was going to say indoctrinated, educated, but I actually mean indoctrinated, educated, right? Up to a certain point to where they say, okay, you are now free and I shall let you free to roam society and to do whatever it is that you have been indoctrinated to do. And here's the thing about being a student. Remember, in the United States at least, they put you in jail if you don't, they put your parents in jail if you don't go to school. You get charged with truancy if you don't go to school. So you have to go to school, right? And part of going to school is supposed to be to learn. But the question is, what are you learning? And so when I looked up the word student, most of our language comes from Latin. And it comes from the Latin word studiare, which means applying oneself to. So my question is, what are we applying ourselves to? Are we applying ourselves to the advancement of our people? Are we applying ourselves to this agenda over here? Are we applying ourselves just to ourselves? Like, I don't know. But what are we applying ourselves to? Because that's what we're a student of. If you go to school for 12 years, you're a student of X, right? And if you decide that you want to go to college, you pick a concentration or a major, right? Because that is what you are trying to be a student of. So presumptively, that means whatever you focus on is what you are an expert in. That's what you know because you've studied it. But another root word of the word student is studium, which means painstaking application. So it's not enough to acquire the information, but it's about painstakingly applying what you have learned that makes you a student, right? Because you can go to school and learn nothing. Because how many of us have come across people who've gone to school and still can't write a sentence, still can't spell, right? Still cannot have a conversation, but they've gone to school. Going to school doesn't simply, that is not what makes you a student. It's the application of what you have studied that makes you a student. But we all need to be students in something, right? And it's what we apply painstakingly. Because being a student is not easy at all. This is why some people don't even want to go to college or whatever the case may be, and that's not the purpose of this conversation. But it's about what are you applying to the point where it's a painstaking application that you are undertaking in order to master this particular subject. And so we also have masters, right? And a master comes from the Old English word magister, which is where also we get the legal word magistrate. And a magister is a man having control or authority, a teacher or tutor. And from the Latin word magister, it also means chief, head, director, or teacher. That is the master. And so my conversation that I want to have with my people is, in this game, in this school of life, what role are you playing? Because here's the thing, you can't be a master without first being a student. And what I found is a lot of us, many of us, want to become the master without ever having to go to school, without ever having to be a student and sit and shut up and learn something and then apply what we have learned. Because only through applying that knowledge are you able to understand. Because most of us, and I said this in the beginning, we are more concerned with being understood than we are with understanding. This is why we talk so much and don't listen. Is because it's more important for us folks to understand than it is to be understood. Because once you understand, or as I say, understand, once you understand something, you know the game that's being played. You know the rules of the game, because now you've sat back, you've observed, you've been tested, and you've shown yourself to now be able to move on, to graduate to the next level. So before we can get to master status, we got to first be willing to be students of the game, right? Hear what I'm saying? Be students of the game. Study the game. Study those who study you, because somebody's studying you. Study those who study you, folks, and I guarantee you, if you play your position and you shut up for a minute and allow yourself to be taught by what you're seeing, you will understand the game that you're a part of, willingly or not. You will understand the rules of the game. And here's the thing. Once you understand the rules of the game, you then know how to move. And you can get to the other side of the game and become a master. That's when you can start checkmating. When you get to the other side of the board. You know what I mean? When you can move in such a way that nobody will know what your next move is. Because you've studied. You've studied your opponent. You've studied the game. You know the rules of the game, and you apply it. And so this is applicable. I talk about this because it's applicable in every single thing. And I boil it back down to, what is our objective? Are we trying to win the game? Or are we okay with, being whatever role we've chosen or has been chosen for us? Are we okay with that role? If we are not, then it is incumbent upon us to study that, to study the game, to master the game. And then you can determine how the rules will go. You make the rules when you become the master. That slavery, it's all the same. It's all the same. When you're the master, you make the rules. You tell people what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, how they're going to do it, because now you're the master. But we got to first be willing to be a student. And the thing I like about Marcus Garvey, obviously he was like, the king of Pan-Africanism. So he understood this stuff. And he once said that people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. And, folks, as we sit on Black History Month and we talk about the contributions and we think about and reflect on the contributions our people have made, we got to really look at the contributions for what they were. Because all of the things that our people have done were written for us. They were done for us. Because if you think about the Christian Bible, it talks about everything in the past was written to teach us, right? The current us. And so if we're not learning and instead we're trying to rebuild some stuff that was already done, then we're not standing on the shoulders of giants. And that means that we're not learning the lessons that we were put here to learn in the first place. We're not appreciating the contributions of the very people that we say we're appreciating. So are we actually going to appreciate those contributions? But what that means is knowing your history, knowing your origins, knowing that your origin did not start with slavery, knowing your culture. Because much has been done, as I said before, to strip us of our knowledge, of our history, of our origins, of our culture. And if you take it back to its logical conclusion, why would you do that? Why would anybody do that? Why would anyone strip a particular group of people? Because remember, it's not everybody. It's not everybody. It's Black people. Black people, this was done to Black people specifically. Why would anyone specifically target this group of people and say, I'm going to erase your history, erase your name, erase your culture, tell you that everything that you've done before is barbaric, that, the spirituality that you practice is witchcraft. I'm going to indoctrinate you into something else. Why would anybody do that? And then enslave you, and then tell you that you're a slave, and then continue to perpetrate and do things to keep you in that place. Why would anybody do that? Could it be that there's something about your origins, something about your history, something special about you that they know that they don't want you to know? Because perhaps they're afraid that you may become a master in the game. So it's incumbent upon us, folks. No one's going to teach us this. It's incumbent upon us to recapture our knowledge. But that means actually deciding that we're going to seek knowledge. And so that brings me to another slide, and I'm going to pull it up here on my phone. But there is a biblical scripture, Proverbs 24, verses 3 and 4, that says, "Through wisdom, a house is built, and by understanding, it is established. By knowledge, the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." So we need knowledge, and we need wisdom, and we need understanding. But without the knowledge, we can't get to the wisdom, right? Without the understanding, we can't get to the wisdom. And this is why I say that it is better to understand than to be understood. Because once you understand, you can apply the wisdom, because you can now look at things from both perspectives in order to choose what role you're going to play. That's the wisdom, folks. And that's what I think sometimes is missing when we make these knee-jerk reactions to things, is we're missing the wisdom because we're not seeking understanding. We're seeking to be understood. We're seeking to be heard. We're seeking validation. And I'm not saying that those things are inherently wrong, right? I'm not placing a judgment on those things themselves, but what I am saying is there is absolute value in understanding, because then, only then, can you get wisdom. Only then will you actually know wisdom. It's the wisdom that builds the house. The wisdom builds the house. So, what's the game? What role are you going to play? But the saying, they tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. And so I challenge my sisters and anyone that's listening to be the seed. But here's the thing about seeds, folks, is that seeds grow because they're seeds, right? We all started from a seed. All of us, every single person on this planet started from a seed. And depending on the type of seed that was planted, how it was watered and cultivated, what light shone upon that seed, the fertilizer, the soil that it was planted in, the nutrients that were in that soil, all of those things are going to determine how the tree grows, how strong it is, how long it lasts. Because here's the thing, a tree without roots, as Marcus Garvey says, a people without the knowledge of their past history and origin and culture is like a tree without roots. The thing about a tree without roots is it's easily uprooted, because you have no roots, nothing to keep you grounded, nothing solid that you're holding on to. And so if we are truly the seeds, all of us, any of us, then you will know a tree by its fruit. That's what the Christian Bible says. You will know a tree by its fruit. And so I say this, folks, is that our knowledge, our wisdom, all of these things are watering the seeds. And if we don't cultivate these things properly, then we will be easily uprooted. And so when we are dividing ourselves among ourselves, how can we possibly be cultivating to build stronger? Because if if you're divided in all sorts of sections, how can we really focus on growing from this seed? Because it's one seed that's planted. And so we got to really be careful about how we water. And so if we're watering with negativity and with judgment and, with labels, then we got to understand that you will know a tree by its fruit, because what we're going to get is going to look just like that. It's going to look divided. And so all I'm saying, folks, is we got to water and cultivate each other with the correct and proper nourishment and intentions. And so that means we got to figure out what is the objective. What game are we playing? Are we playing someone else's game, or are we playing on our own board? What are we doing? But either way, we're going to be participants in it, whether we like it or not. And so I would much rather be the student and then be the master than to constantly be a pawn used for someone else to exchange for something else that they value. And so when we want to go directly from being a master without first being a student, it's foolhardy, because then we lack the proper foundation that we need, the proper understanding to get to that place of mastery. And so we got to first acknowledge that we don't know it all. Many of us think we do, but when we got to leave room to be watered. We got to leave room to grow, and we got to leave other people room to grow too. So that means that our allies aren't going to be perfect, because you aren't. That means we got to decide who we're going to be, what we are going to plant. And when we are tested, because we're all going to be tested, because we're students of the game, right? When we are tested, it's not about simply being able to recite the facts or to recite what the teacher says. But in order to pass the test, you got to be able to apply the knowledge that you are given. Not just in this situation, but in every situation. Because only then can you actually graduate. But you do that by looking at the common scheme or the program that connects all the information. That's how you're able to ascertain the answer. Is you look at the thing that's consistent throughout. What is consistent throughout? And then you will be able to see the answer. So it's time that we stop talking, and that we start listening, and we start observing, and that we are willingly being students of the game, because only then can we become masters. And remember that at the end of the day, you will always know a tree by its fruit. And so, folks, with that, I say this: you don't have to carry all the bags that you've been given, whether it be the bags of judgment, resentment, anger, lack of forgiveness, whatever it may be. You don't have to carry all those bags, because all they do is load you down with guilt and burdens and all of these things that are not going to allow you to flourish and to thrive. And if your goal is to thrive, then maybe it's time that you release some of these judgments and some of these bags in order to be a strong tree. So, folks, with that, I thank you, and I ask you to tune in next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Sis, we need to talk. Have a great week.